All right, welcome back to the Echoes, Notre Dame podcast. Mike Golic Jr., Jessica Smetana here with you guys. Reacting to the College Football Playoff Committee's first round of rankings that came out on Tuesday night. Little bonus pod here because, Jess, as we've seen, Notre Dame kind of at the center of the crosshairs. Last night was one of those nights I realized just how much social media upvotes negative content that's there to piss me off because I was fed an absolute trough of people hating on the Irish for their 10th ranking, their 10th seed in the initial college football playoff rankings, which, as we'll discuss, is important because in this bracket where the 5 highest ranked conference champions get in, that includes the group of 5, this case with Virginia being the leader for the ACC at 14 and Memphis being the leader for the group of 5 unranked, both of them get bumped up in the field, which means 11 and 12 are knocked out. So Notre Dame, the last in the way it currently is situated among the top 12. What did you make of this initial ranking and reaction, Jess?
Well, I love that you're eating all of the negative slop off of social media while I was enjoying a nice festive dinner for my boyfriend's birthday. So I missed all of the negativity, Mike.
Happy birthday, Lee.
Thank you for absorbing that for this podcast. To be honest, I feel really good about it. This is the benchmark, right? I mean, this is the first ranking. It doesn't matter specifically in where teams are ranked. What matters is who's above who right now. Because if Notre Dame wins out, like we've talked about, we think they've got a really good chance of maybe even hosting a game now, considering who's above them, who those teams have to play still, who's behind them, who those teams have to play still. And Notre Dame, knowing exactly what's in front of them, beat Navy, Pitt, Syracuse, and Stanford, and you're in. They put you at 10. Miami's down at 18. That was obviously going to be the 10-2 Miami conversation that we had on the podcast this week was going to be the interesting thing. How close together were they? Would Miami be ahead of Notre Dame given the head-to-head? But I think the committee's telling you that, Miami's lost to SMU when it came in the calendar, the way that they've played the last few weeks. Once again, like we talked about, losing in November to a team like SMU that has 3 losses, the way they lost, that is more important to them than Notre Dame having 2 losses to start the season by a combined 4 points, which is what we hoped, Mike, but we weren't exactly sure if that's the way it was going to go.
No, and you're right. That being abundantly clear, I said on the pod we did the other day, I was surprised that Miami was ranked as low as they were in the AP, and I was surprised they ended up ranked as low as they were here. And I went back and looked on the College Football Playoff Committee's website because there's been a lot of talk about where head-to-head factors into this. And the sentence that really stuck out to me, so they say on the website, the selection committee ranks the teams based on the members' evaluation of the team's performance on the field, using strength of schedule, head-to-head results, and comparison of results against common opponents to decide among teams that are comparable. And while both have 2 losses, and we can get to Oklahoma and Texas's place in that conversation as well, I think what the committee made pretty clear here is they don't view them as comparable right now based on what we've seen in the last couple of months. And I was somewhat surprised by that given the resumes, but they're really over-indexing, or maybe not over-indexing, but indexing hard on vibes, this committee. And they see the improvement that I think has been pretty apparent for Notre Dame, but they clearly rewarded that with what they've seen rather than what we see in some of the metrics that would point towards Miami, that head-to-head, Oklahoma or Texas maybe getting the nod as well.
If Notre Dame had lost, or let's say Notre Dame had beaten Boise State, they beat NC State, they beat Boston College, but they were allowing more than a touchdown and a field goal in those games, Mike, I'm curious if Notre Dame's still in the top 10. I think Notre Dame's defensive improvement in the first 2 weeks, or since the first 2 weeks, is huge right now for that. And like you said, it feels like it could be vibes. It feels like it could be like trending upwards for Notre Dame, whereas Miami is trending downwards. But I also think Notre Dame is dominating in a lot of the advanced stats and S&P Plus, which is Bill Connolly's metric with ESPN, and FEI, which is efficiency, the Promo Efficiency Index. They're top 10 in both of those. I believe they're 7 right now. Notre Dame was top 10 in the BCS rankings. I don't know if you still follow I was just
going to bring that up. I went back and checked that for all the people that were pissed off and thought the committee was just rewarding Notre Dame for a nothing burger. The BCS had Notre Dame above Texas, Oklahoma at the 10 spot, just like the committee did, which has kind of been par for the course.
Another thing we mentioned on the show earlier this week was NC State being more interesting common opponent than BC, which has lost every Power Power 4 game they've played this year, and lost to UConn. NC State, they ended Georgia Tech's unbeaten streak. They beat Wake Forest. They beat Virginia in a non-conference game that is just so bizarre. But Notre Dame beat them very handily in the 36-7 matchup at Notre Dame Stadium a couple weeks ago. So I think that also is probably taken into consideration here. NC State, not the best team this year on anyone's schedule, but they're capable of beating good teams, and Notre Dame was able to pretty much blow them out.
Yeah, and that's common opponent's going to factor in down the stretch. I do think the one thing a lot of people have pointed to with Notre Dame right now is so much of this is buoyed by the quote-unquote good losses and the way that happened early in the season. Notre Dame's best win currently 19th ranked USC, who interesting to keep an eye on as the season goes along. They play ranked Iowa, who had a big bump from the committee relative to what the other polls had been saying, checking in at number 20, and then on the road at Oregon. And so how USC's season finished it up, they're one of the teams with that schedule in mind that's going to factor in pretty strongly down the home stretch of the season, as is Pitt. Like Notre Dame, we talked about that being the scariest game left on their schedule. Pitt, who's been playing renewed football since their quarterback change, plays Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, and Miami to end the season. They're going to ruin somebody's year towards the end of this season, and Notre Dame could certainly be in it. Jess, how justified do you think? Miami fans are certainly going to have their gripes, but I think we've seen, and I saw, Mike Ryan, who you work with the Levitard show, I work with Notre Dame, said in the last month, Miami has played about 2 quarters of quality football and not handled their business. So even Miami fans kind of admitting, hey, we have not made our bed in a way that deserves a reward as of late. For Texas and Oklahoma fans who feel like, hey, Texas, the offense has been trending in the right direction lately. Oklahoma's got a couple more ranked wins, albeit in the lower end of the top 25 to point to. How justified do you think they are in being upset positioned below Notre Dame? And in this case, right now, out of the top 12 when it comes to the bracket?
Yeah, I understand the anger for sure, but I think being boxed out of your conference championship is the issue for Miami more than anything. I think that if you're in one of the conferences like the ACC and now having several teams ahead of you being statistically very unlikely to make it into that conference championship game, that's the issue is like losing those 2 conference games. And obviously Louisville's a good football team. They have a really great defense this year. But again, losing to an SMU team that lost to 2 teams in the Big 12 that aren't even in their own conference fight down the stretch here, TCU and Baylor, and also losing by 1 point to Wake Forest, which was a crazy game. Wake Forest is also like similar to NC State, one of those teams that has they may become bowl eligible. They have 5 wins right now. Very sketchy schedule, but very consequential games that they played in. The loss to Georgia Tech, which was decided on a almost terrible officiating call, and then the field goal against SMU ending up going to matter quite a bit for the ACC race. But I understand the Miami frustration, but I also think that Miami fans are feeling deja vu from 2024. Sure. I do think people want to accuse the committee of having the name brand bias, but I think it's not name brand bias more than it is recency bias. Like Notre Dame finished number 2 in college football last year. They lost early, and then they won several games in a row and ended up making it to the playoff and making it to the national championship game. I think that helps Notre Dame more than the name Notre Dame. And Miami did what Miami did this year, they also did last year. They lost, 2 of their last 3, I think, to Georgia Tech and Syracuse, and got boxed out of the ACC championship game, and then lost their Pop-Tart Bowl game. I don't think that necessarily matters very much, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think it's more so playoff recency bias than it is like brand name bias. Miami just couldn't afford to lose to SMU, frankly, the weekend before the first ranking came out.
Yeah, I think what you bring up there, like the human element of this committee that's baked into, hey, are you going to embarrass us in public when it comes to some of these bigger games later on? I mean, maybe creeps into an extent, but what you brought up there to me, I think is even more important in this conversation is I saw people say the committee is not supposed to factor in when these games are played or when you win. The head-to-head is supposed to be head-to-head, whether it's September and November. But I think we've seen borne out over the history of all this, losing early has always been better than losing late. And I can say firmly from a football standpoint, every single coach stands up in every single meeting in the offseason and says, we're building to try and play our best football in November. We all talk about what a crapshoot the AP poll is at the beginning of the season because we don't really know anything about these teams, especially in the NIL and transfer portal era where roster turnover is so rampant. And so to say that a win in September can't be looked at a bit differently, especially week one of the season, than the way we look at teams in November who are supposed to have a surer sense of themselves, more time under task with this group, know more about their current roster, and be peaking at the right time, I think ignores the reality of the game, especially at the college level. It's one thing in the NFL where it's paid pros and the product can hold a bit more year over year. But in college, we know, hey, this changes pretty rapidly for all the reasons that we've acknowledged. And so I do think looking and seeing improvement in this level of the sport in particular is an important part of this. And I think probably the biggest factor for Notre Dame.
Yes, I agree with that 100%. And I think that if you want to be upset with where teams are ranked, there's a number of teams in the top 10 who don't have the best resume wins, Oregon being one of them. I mean, their best win is probably, I guess they're getting credit for the Penn State game, which I understand. I mean, but
Sure.
other than that, they lost by 10 to Indiana at home, and they're ranked number 9 right now. Indiana's number 2. I could see the argument for Indiana being number 1 based on that criteria,
Yeah.
but Ohio State's at number 1 with a Texas team that still has to play Georgia and Texas A&M. As their best win currently. Behind that, I think would be the Washington road game that they have. And like we said, Ohio State right now, depending on how Texas does, is a team that could end up finishing the season undefeated without a really great ranked win. So it's the first ranking, and a lot of these things will take care of themselves. Like Texas being at 11, I understand they have a terrible loss to Florida, which is a worse loss than either of Notre Dame's losses. But also, if they beat Georgia, guess what? They're going to be back up there, and Georgia's going to fall because that'll be Georgia's second loss.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, if you are Oklahoma and Texas and you're upset about your lot in life because you're in the SEC and we know the conference schedule there provides that, Oklahoma's going to play at Alabama and then against a ranked Missouri team as well. So if both of those teams or either of those teams win out, they're going to vault Notre Dame because Notre Dame doesn't have a win left on their schedule that's going to be the caliber of either of the wins available to those two teams. But Notre Dame being positioned there does offer them the ability now to where, hey, as long as you take care of business the rest of the season, you're going to be okay because the committee's kind of shown you where you're already thought of in this. I think the team that's probably got a justified gripe is Louisville in that regard, even though they've got a through line there based on what they've accomplished to still get to their conference championship game. But everyone else, yeah, like BYU and Texas Tech played this weekend, sitting in the 8-9 spot. So that's going to kind of help shape itself out here. So ultimately, a great result for Notre Dame. Clear indication that the product they've put on the field and what people believe they're watching when they watch Notre Dame. And your point, FPI, SP Plus, all these different metrics indicate people statistically, eye test, believe Notre Dame is playing like a good to great football team right now, and the committee reflected that.
Real quick before we go, if you're giving some argument fodder to Notre Dame fans right now that are having to defend this to their friends, what is like the number one thing you can tell Notre Dame fans? Like, here's your ironclad argument against all the Notre Dame haters in your life.
Man, just log off for a little bit. Like, that's really what I've got. Because again, just like we've talked about, like there are understandable gripes with Notre Dame being there. The biggest thing you have on your side is you've played consistently improving football, maybe with the exception of the BC game that, the score was again closer than the actual product on the field probably indicated, but I think you have that as your backdrop. It's the eye in the sky. It's the fact that your team has improved each and every week, took the losses at the beginning of the season, and has responded with playing renewed football. And, to go along with that, the play away from beating both those teams kind of mentality that the committee talked about, that's really what you've got. Because, again, it's not going to be the ranked wins that you can point to. It's, not going to be the head-to-head that you can point to with Miami. So it really is, and this seems to be the message from the committee, we believe the football team playing on the field looks and has purported itself as one of the best in the country. I don't know if you have any better advice for them.
No, I mean, I would say, I think logging off is, that's not some people can't. I mean, I can't. Clearly you couldn't last night. No, I would say that, yeah, like you said, Notre Dame's playing a lot better. I think the committee's probably taking into account CJ Carr, starting his first 2 games as a starter and how good he's looked, how good Notre Dame's backfield is. But I would say it's not a given that Notre Dame will win out. And if they can prove that, if they can win these 4 games, I think that it's hard to leave out a team that has 10 wins in a row and 2 losses by a combined 4 points. And no matter what that team's name is, I think that is a pretty good argument for Notre Dame to make it in a 12-team field. They, like we said, way back when in week 4, Notre Dame would have to win out and get lucky. So far, they've won out up to this point, and they've gotten a little lucky given there's not, 9 dominant teams ahead of them. This is a wacky college football season. So
it certainly is. Your job for Notre Dame since week 2 is to be undeniable, and on the field so far, they have been undeniable. There's been great performances from the defense, from Jeremiah Love, from CJ Carr in a way that's registered nationally and clearly enough to go and produce that top 10 ranking in the committee's first round of the polls. At the Echoes ND Pod on Twitter is where you can direct all of your complaints. Definitely not to me and Jess's personal handles. Stay away, because I'll just mute you and go on with my life. Jess, this was a ton of fun. Thank you as always. To everyone listening, we appreciate you. Go Irish.